This is a Tuesday workshop with Paul and Jason. We've got some folks out. Some of our faculty members are out, either on particular jobs today or visiting family since it's Christmas time. Christmas time is here.
Which
All right.
means our gift to you is ourselves.
No returns, no take backs.
We were talking about no returns and refunds yesterday too.
Were we? Oh, we were. I had a good call yesterday. I haven't done the Coffee with Humans thing in a long time. It's since April. I didn't realize that it had been so long. It was since April that I had my last Coffee with Humans call. And Coffee with Humans was a podcast that I'd launched in March. I want to say March, April of 2020, right? When COVID was locking down or the government was locking down because of COVID. And what stood out for me was part of this conversation that I had with this guy named Justin, who does video editing, was he earlier this year had made the decision to be consistent with content creation and trusted the process. And he said he had a really hard time trusting the process to know that as he created content and just put it out there, then he would get leads. And sure enough, he put content out there and he got leads. And it took him several months, but now he says he's getting consistent leads every month because he's putting content out there. And one of the things that I brought up to him was, I think, something that you said on one of our previous calls, which is there's no overnight successes. There's only overnight awareness. And he really took that to heart. And I think that's pretty true. There's no overnight success. There's only overnight attention. That was the word you used, attention. So people if you have a product, service, or message that you want to make available to people, they have to know that it exists. And if they don't know that it exists, then you will surely sell nothing because nobody's beating a path down to your door.
Yeah. In fact, that just brought up a conversation I had a few days ago with our now mutual friend, Cameron Hall, who I've introduced you to. And Cam and I have been talking almost every Friday for the last 5 years, ever since we became friends. We met through a mastermind. We were both brand new rookies in the world of entrepreneurship. And I said to him, Cam, he was telling me about some of the stuff that he's got on the horizon in 2024. I told him about some of the stuff you and I are working on for 2024. And I said, Cam, I'm having a flashback to in November of 2018, we were in New York City at this mastermind meeting. And it's led by a guy named Vince Del Monte. He was the entrepreneur who founded it. And Vince was giving a talk about something, and he was introducing a couple of the key guys that he had there with him, who were some of his oldest friends, closest friends in business. And they were all, it was like 4 or 5 guys had all, started with nothing and come up in the first wave of the fitness business on the internet. And he said, I just remember over time, I found these guys and and we locked arms and said, let's go crush it together. But he said, but at the time, none of us was making more than about $5,000 a year off of internet sales. It wasn't enough. It was nothing to sneeze at. We were still working jobs and all that kind of thing. And I said, Cam, you and I are both 5 years in now. And I think there's been a couple other people in my life who I've made similar sort of, sometimes they were spoken and sometimes not, but I've made similar sort of agreement. And then lo and behold, you and I are working to really basically to 10X what we're doing in Emissary this year. And it remains to be seen how that all pans out. But that there is a body of 4 years of work behind that, 4 years of making mistakes, 4 years of trying to make sense of it all, trying to understand it, and eventually reaching that point where I realized that the only way forward for me is together with the right people. And I feel very optimistic that there's about to be an explosion of the positive kind. And And then the question is, if you could have done that at the beginning, would you have done it? I don't know anymore. I don't think I would have, because look at all the relationships I would have passed up on, all the people that I wouldn't have known, and all the lessons I wouldn't have learned if I hadn't gone the way I have. And that might sound crazy to say, because yeah, but you could have had $1 million. I know, but what's $1 million worth in light of what I've learned and who I've learned it with? So my 2 cents.
That's an interesting viewpoint. I want to interject because I know you pretty well. I know you a little bit. How's that? I want to put that I feel like I should put that on a t-shirt for you. An explosion of the positive kind.
There are some people, if anybody I know is listening to this podcast, I know you're laughing when you heard that.
Explosion of the positive kind. Yeah, I look back like you. It's a good point that you bring up. Would you have done it the same way? Or would you have done it differently when you first started out? And I think that I find that when people evaluate that sort of question, the answer is generally no, I would not have done it differently, because like you talk about, there's so much that would have been lost had the moment today come more easily, more, I don't know, maybe somebody might think about it. So that wasn't very efficient to get to the end. And I don't think life is efficient. Life is not an efficiency game. It's not a productivity game. That's one of the things that stands out to me, because if I look at my resume, I have been involved in so many things, none of which have really come together we talk about this idea of tension and awareness of a fixed brand, right? If you look at some people like Johnny Depp, for instance, Johnny Depp has a certain type of movie that he makes. There's a way that he interacts.
Yep.
So oh, that's a Johnny Depp part. Likewise, you might think of another actor, Jim Carrey, perhaps. Oh, that's a Jim Carrey part. That's a Steve Carell part, right? People develop these personas or have these personas that we see them as, and it's just a slice of who they are. But I'm wrapping this all back into what you're talking about. When I sold my e-commerce business, I had a lot of money and from that sale, and took time off and whatnot. And if I would have stopped, if I compare the paths, if I would have stopped right there and said, I'm going to ride this out versus I'm going to get involved in all of these things, do all of these things, I would not have had any of the connections that I have.
Yeah.
My life would be a completely different life, a totally different landscape. Yeah. And I don't know that one is better or worse than the other. It's like you play the cards that you're dealt. And when you play a bad hand, go back, play another hand. And that I think, if we go back to Justin's point of trust the process of becoming into this moment took all the prior moments. Mm-hmm. And now what are you going to do with that moment? Look for the value. But when you find the value, communicate the value. It's not, if we're just finding value, I think that's not enough. Mm-hmm. Find value from the journey, all of the collective experiences, and then communicate that, because all of the collective experiences have brought you to this point, provided a foundation, perhaps, for the work that you do, insights to help others, skills, experience, joy, pain, sorrow, all of those things combined. But if nobody ever knows, if nobody ever hears, then what's the point? Yeah. That I think is where some people get stuck. Entrepreneurs perhaps get stuck because they, number one, are either fighting all of the past to this moment. And then they're fighting this moment instead of being grateful for this moment. And then they're not using these things And then furthermore, they're not communicating it to anybody else.
Yeah.
And then they wonder why they're stuck. It's fighting against reality, which is not a thing. And then being unwilling to communicate about it, which reduces one's ability to make progress or sell or make connections. Yeah. I think that's what I'm hearing between all of these statements.
There's something to be said there for the ancient saying. I don't mean to get philosophical here, but this is going to
be another
refrain
t-shirt.
of this.
Explosion of the positive kind.
You know how I think Dennis Miller used to say, I don't mean to go off on a rant here before going off on a rant here.
Yeah.
So that's my refrain on the workshop. I don't mean to get philosophical here, but actually, I think the point, one of the points, there may be more than one of the reasons we get to go through that is the whole idea of our existence centers around teaching and sharing what we know. Now, is it the only reason? No, but I think if you really want to master something, then you have to be able to teach it, because you have to be able to help somebody else recognize when they're doing it wrong versus doing it right. So the old quote from the Ethics of the Fathers was, I've learned much from my elders. I've learned even more from my peers, but I've learned the most from my students, because the students have the least grasp of the context and the timing of doing something. So if I'd said in 2018, I'm going into business for myself, and 2 weeks later I was a millionaire, I wouldn't have anything to teach. And I don't think my knowledge would be valuable, because you would say, what'd you do? You pushed a couple buttons and you got $1 million, right? It's almost like I could go into a casino and do that. And that's why one of the things that I emphasize over and over again is that any entrepreneurial journey, in the context that we do it in the Think Growth community, has to take place under the umbrella of a journey of maturity, personal, professional maturity. If you're going to that's why we keep saying you have to, not that the money is not important, but you have to be able to take your eyes off of it and say, what's the bigger prize? And the bigger prize is the kind of person you're becoming, whether you get the money or not. Because to go back to another refrain, right? If you get the money and you're still a jerk, then all you are is a bigger jerk. But if you get the money and you're a much more big-hearted, open-minded, wise, accomplished, humble, helpful type of person, then you can multiply being big-hearted and wise and accomplished and helpful and humble on a grand scale, which is what's going to make the world a better place.
Yeah, I like that. It's not really a proverb, but the scripture, that he who's faithful little be given much. And I think that some people look at that from the perspective of a test. Like, this is the test. You got to be faithful with a little. And then if you're graded good on that, then you're going to be passed on to level 2.
Get a cookie.
But I think the principle really more is that there's a framework. There is a way the world works.
Mm-hmm.
This is just the way things are made. That if you misuse the little things, then people see that and they don't entrust you with their big things.
Mm-hmm.
And if you honor those small things, people trust you with more. You are put in positions. You're actually drawn into positions, asked to be in positions that draw more people because they are hungry for something.
Sure.
And that, I think, that's the opportunity, the way the community is structured. If you've got a product, service, or message that you think is going to change the world, you have to be good at sharing that message. And that is the principle of get good at these skills, get good at these little things, and then the big things would come. And I think that is not that we, to your point earlier, not that we do that ourselves. We have to engage other people in the process who are good at things that we're bad at. I've told people this I don't, sometimes I don't take my own advice, if you can imagine that. And I'll put that on a t-shirt for me.
That's a terrible advice. That's a terrible idea. I don't know what you're thinking.
Sometimes I don't take my own advice. Your t-shirt will be explosion of the positive kind, mildly. Sometimes I don't take my own advice. But these sorts of things ring in my ears sometimes because I've when working with founders, let's say, the conversation inevitably comes to a point where I'll say something like, stop doing things you don't like and you're no good at. It's very simple. You don't like it, you're no good at it, stop doing it. Because there is somebody who does like it and is good at it. And when you work with that other person, it multiplies your exposure and the job gets done better. Those two things hand in hand, I think, are really key that most founders, new, inexperienced, young, whatever founders pass up on, because that's contrary to how we set off in life, particularly as guys, let's say. Like we want to go blaze a trail. We are going to show you, I can hit that point. I can be the star of the show. That's just our nature. And that's great in certain circumstances and all sorts of deficit in others. And then when we get to the marketplace, we then tend to get in this trap where we feel the need to do it ourselves, accomplish things ourselves, keep the spoils for ourselves, rather than trusting the process that this, whatever magic is being created in and through us, takes time and it takes other people. And it is not a process that can be forced. You cannot force yourself into respect. You cannot force yourself into authority. You cannot force yourself into these things. Not really. You can have a position. We all have probably worked for somebody who's in a position of authority, and yet everybody's like, don't listen to that person. Listen to this.
Get them to rubber stamp it and you do it. Yeah.
That eventually caps out. And that hinders, I think, our ability to share our product, service, or message when we're looking for that fast win by ourselves, rather than settling in, slowing down, and gathering, allowing people to come help us and then asking them and multiplying that. The breadth of awareness that one individual just cannot have. That's why PR exists, right? It's one thing to talk about yourself. It's an entirely different thing for somebody else to talk about you. Much more believable when someone else talks about you, even if it's not true. And that is public relations.
Just push back on this a little bit, Jason, to get the meat, to get the real gold out of it. I think I agree. There's a lot of pressure we feel to show, I did it all myself. You know what's held me back in the past? I'm quite happy to share it with people, but I'm always afraid that it's going to set me up for some kind of obligation I can't afford to pay back. Like that's what's been, and just react to that a little bit, because here's the thing, like I'm imagining I might be pretty rare in that, but I'm not the only person. You're sitting there thinking, I want to do this. I want to grow this business, but I don't have the money to do all this. And I don't know anybody who can help me. And I don't want to go around begging and knocking on doors and asking people, can you do this for me? I don't know. So there's that angle of it too. There's like this whole thing of thinking it's all on me. I love Craig Ballantyne, but he used to say this annoying thing. If it is to be, it's up to me. And I'm like, no, I don't want to hear that. I understand what he's getting at, but I'm like, but I don't want to make that a mantra throughout my life, because the truth is there's a lot of stuff that if it is to be and it's up to me, it's not going to be. Anyway.
I think we both know that it's not all up to us. That I think this is a faith-based community. And so there is somewhere in ourselves, we go, it's not all up to us. And we trust in that in some way. And then we go, I hope that's not just me not taking responsibility. Like having faith and not taking responsibility are very closely It's related to I think there's a saying a long time ago, so heavenly minded, you're no earthly good. Which I think there's some truth in that I've found through the years.
Oh, absolutely.
This idea though of setting up for an obligation you can't pay back. Don't deny another person's desire to help.
Yeah.
Let's move these things to the extreme. I think we can learn lessons from the extreme. There were years ago, this is probably early 2000s, my good friend from high school, I found out was in a psychiatric ward at a hospital because he had attempted suicide.
Mhm.
The hospital that he was in was directly in my path from my house to my office. And every day I would drive past the hospital to my office and go, I should probably go check on him. And then I thought, yeah, but I don't really keep in contact with people from high school. And what would I say? And that's awkward. And is his family going to be there? What should I expect? I'm just a young 20 something other guy. Anyhow, he's similar age, but for 2 weeks, I drove back and forth in there past this hospital every day, a couple times a day. Maybe I should check in there. Maybe I should go up there. But how awkward is that, right? All these thoughts every day. And two or so weeks, maybe a little bit after, my parents, who went to church with their family, my parents said, oh, hey, we got to give you an update about this guy. And they said, unfortunately, he got released and he completed suicide. He'd corrected his original problem. Whatever went wrong in his first attempt, he figured it out the second time after he was released. And it was interesting because in that exchange, I ended up on after that exchange, I ended up on my back deck, feeling so broken over this moment. And I journaled it all out. And what I saw were a handful of things. Number one, I was offered an opportunity for 2 weeks to drive right past his place. And I would right past the psychiatric ward. And I thought, for 2 weeks, this is 50 times or more.
Yeah.
I thought I should stop in on him. And then I thought, how awkward is that going to be? And that's about me, not about them. So that's a lot of like me trouble. Never mind. My buddy he attempted to leave the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm worried about things being awkward for me. What? And then when I heard, oh, he's out, my first reaction was, oh, good. I don't have to worry about that. He's okay. And then boom, right after that, and he's gone. And I was like, oh no. So it became a lot about how awkward things were going to be for me. And then relief when I didn't have to figure out how to step into the awkward moment, to, I think, shame,
Sorrow.
and sorrow over what exists in me that in a person's time of perhaps greatest need, I would be so concerned with how things would be awkward.
Yeah.
And from that moment, I made a little pact with myself. And it went something, and I swear sometimes you can imagine. And I decided, fuck awkward. Because sometimes things are just awkward. And what you have to do is you have to give it the middle finger and say, I'm not sure where you're this awkward thing, why you've been given so much power. But there are real things that have to be resolved. And so from that point, I determined that sometimes people don't help because they don't know how to get through the awkward point. And yet, I also think of this, that for every time we didn't ask for help, I'll look at my life now. If somebody came to me, and there people have since then come to me and said, here's where I'm at, I am all in on that moment, all in. And if they didn't tell me, I would have no idea because I'm just going about my life. And now when I know, I'm all in. Don't deny me the opportunity to help you in your darkest time just because things are awkward. You have no idea how little I care about awkward.
Yeah.
Right. So I think I say all that to make the point that whatever mountain is existing in somebody's mind for why a person wouldn't help or why you wouldn't help or whatever, it is very small for somebody else.
Yeah.
And of no consequence. And maybe they're just like, every time I feel that feeling, I give it the middle finger because it doesn't belong. This is awkward is not the issue. And don't deny me the opportunity to help you because you think things are going to be awkward. I couldn't care less.
You said the other day when we were having a similar conversation, we were talking about these events that we're planning, and you said, I was just being honest. I haven't done these things because I can't manage that many details. I don't have experience doing it, and I don't know where to go to get all of this stuff happening. And you said, yeah, what's new and foreign to you is not new and foreign to me. And it was not the first time you'd said that. The first time you'd said it to me was actually going the other direction. It was about writing your book. And when we finished your book, you were recording the testimonial. And one of the things you said was, to me, to get beyond writing 3,000 words and feeling confident about my message was foreign territory. Like I had never been able to do it, but you came along and you weren't afraid of that. You were able to walk me right through that. And I think that's very important for an entrepreneur to hear, just because wherever you feel weak and vulnerable and inexperienced and unqualified, I think God's plan is that you end up around people who don't feel that way in those areas. They feel that way in other areas, but not in the ones where you need, right? It's that whole concept of magnetism that we're talking about in one of our new books that's coming out pretty soon. It'll be available everywhere on Amazon, right? The whole concept of magnetism. You take
Yeah.
two magnets and you put the positive to positive and negative to negative, they'll repel each other. But you flip one of them upside down, negative to negative, and they come together. Same principle.
Yeah, there's a lot to be gained in working with other people with differing strengths. Not only do we gain the humility that we need to be able to get along with other people, because we go, I don't even know what I'm talking about, but these people do. That's important because that allows us to recognize other people's strengths without so much of a bias of our own.
Mm-hmm.
But it also enables them to do their best work. So your comment of, I'm not sure if I'll be able to repay, I get myself in a situation where it feels imbalanced, right? I see it from the other perspective sometimes, because sometimes I feel like, man, I've given so much stuff and then I get screwed. And what I've had to do in my life is just commit to the giving. Once I've committed to giving, I don't expect anything in return. Yeah. I expect you to screw me, not you, but whoever I'm giving to, I expect that at some point in time, there's going to arise in me some sort of feeling, whether it's justified or not, of I've given too much. I had a friend of mine, in fact, was not, how do I characterize this? Was stuck wanting to launch a brand and a podcast, video cast, all this other stuff, right? Mm-hmm. Was at the point of being so scared about just launching it that they weren't doing anything about it. Now, good friend of mine at the time. And I then said, I'm not scared and you shouldn't be either. Here's why it's such a great idea for you. And here's what I see in you. And here's how I think it's blah, 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 right? Laid out the whole thing. Okay, great. Fine. I'll do this. All right. Here, I'll do this with you. Here's where you're going to put your files. Here's your logo. Here's your video stuff. Here's the setup for your live stream. Here's the audio. Here's the ads. Here's the template. I'll review your contracts. Here's met with this person. Set up the whole thing. Also, here's how I'm going to get paid. I don't need any up front. It's fine. Write me as if you collect money on this thing, if you get sponsors on it, you can pay me
Right.
from the sponsorship dollars. In fact, I'll even help you figure out how to price all that stuff so that you can make what you need and I'll make something on top of it. It was a year later, year and a half, maybe a year, something like that. Found out that due to this individual's own personal circumstances, started talking shit behind my back about how nobody ever helps me and they can't get anything. And I was just like, yeah, that's what we're doing here. You haven't paid me for hosting, which you agreed to in that contract. Oh, I can't. Just for like find out that making bank. I don't have any money. Man, like that's not true. None of this is true. And you're now complaining about how terrible everything is and how everybody's mistreated you. And I was like, your files are still sitting on my server. And I haven't said boo. And you have the audacity to complain to me about this stuff. And then it was like, I need to do this other stuff. And I was like, yeah, what you need to do is just to remind you, here was the original contract that we agreed to. I forwarded it to your email. I don't want to review that. I don't want to talk about the past. This is the present. This is the contract agreed to, and we've never agreed to anything different. I don't want to talk about that. This stresses me out. Like it should, because you're talking crap about me when I've done, you wouldn't exist without me. How's that? You could just say thank you. We could even part ways at this point in time just by you saying, hey, sorry, I got all persnickety on you. I was going through some stuff and goodbye. I'd be like, okay, fine. And even now, like wanting more stuff. I know that you're complaining over here. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to ignore you now. You can do whatever you want. I don't care. And I've determined, instead of getting bent out of shape about it, because this is not the first time this little thing has happened. Instead of getting bent out of shape about it, I go, you know what? That was some good work. And she's got what she needs and she'll get what she deserves. And none of it is my problem.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, it was good work and I made some connections out of it. All right, fine. And I learned something. I learned from that it's be more clear and be a little more cautious.
Yeah. Communicate better.
Watch the people. And one of the things I've learned also from that is watch the people around that person. Who they associate with will tell you everything you need to know. Because and long time ago, I learned don't trust the thing that person says. It doesn't matter.
And pay more attention to what they do than what they say.
Oh yeah. Don't give any credence to what they say. That was a lesson a long time ago when I decided, and this is just tweaking my own method of working through these situations so that I can personalize them to myself. Because nobody gives you a rule book for these things. They give you here's some concepts to think about. Then you have to incorporate them by living your own life. I learned that I will never take a step. If I'm helping somebody grow something or whatever, produce something, create something out of nothing, I will only ever get one step ahead of you. If you don't walk to meet that step, I will not walk to meet. I will go no further. I will give it no thought even. And that was a lesson learned a long time ago. I would create a whole thing.
But in all that time.
And then this person didn't actually want that, wasn't capable of doing it anyhow. So that's disappointing because now it's my thing. And I didn't want to create another thing on my own.
Which is what I was referring to at the outset when I just casually mentioned the conversation we had about refunds and all that. That's another lesson that you learn is you begin to sense what is the value of time and energy that I put into this, not just what's the monetary value, but what's the What is the expenditure of my being that goes into this? Because, boy, I tell you, I've learned the hard way, which was the best way, not to spend 1 second on things when I can tell from some of the criteria you mentioned, this is going nowhere. So I got a random email one day, and it was slow. Like I didn't have anything going on. I got this random email from this guy, and he didn't even like his English was a little broken, but he made sense. But I was like, okay, he's writing to me in a little bit of broken English, but he's not a foreigner, at least as far as I can tell. He's got a total regular anglicized name. And he said, he's like, his manuscript is attached. Here's my manuscript. Can you fix it? And what would you charge? And I opened it up and I looked at it, and it was just a bunch of babble. And I wrote back, I said, I can't help you at all. You're going to have to talk to someone else. Because I know this guy is probably hoping for a couple of $100, and he has no story to tell. It's just personal. It's just stuff from his personally remembering. He has no plot. He has no, and I'm like, yep, I know not to even take it into consideration. And that wisdom informed the conversation we had about the refunds. And that wisdom is what you acquire by being a 10-year overnight success. If I had got $1 million 2 weeks after I got fired from my last insurance job, what would I have done with that money? I would have spent it on all kinds of stupid things that wouldn't have helped me. And so then you say to yourself, what would I spend that money on now, 5 years later, having gone through all this? Not a bunch of things I already spent it on, I can tell you that. But I only know that because I was forced to embrace in some cases by my own bad decisions, but I nonetheless have embraced, and in hindsight, and certainly going forward, can say, we want to do these events this year, and I have to be prepared that despite our best efforts in crossing every T and dotting every I, that could still fail.
Possible.
It's possible. It's unlikely, but it's possible. If it does, it's not the end of the world. It's not the end of it. The show isn't over. It doesn't make either of us dumb or bird brain, none of that. It's simply part of the journey. And you have to find the silver lining in it. You have to own it and say, this is mine. Does it suck? Yes. Would I have just as soon avoided it? Yes. But it's the path I had to go through so that I can rise and attempt it again, or attempt a new version of it or whatever, or pivot and try something different. But I can certainly look behind me and say, everything I've done in the last year has been good, but it's not enough to move beyond my current limitations. So there's no sense in staying where I am either. It's go forward and maybe fall on my face, or stay here and just barely treading water. And I don't want to just tread water. I want to ride the waves and experience the full joy of the ocean. If I'm going to do that, then we got to swim out into deeper waters, and I got to take the risk that I'm swimming with the sharks, and I'm swimming with the deep currents and the waves and everything that's below the surface there that I don't know about yet.
Every investment guru would tell you that investment is about managing risk. It is not cheaply reducing risk. A lot of people want to reduce risk. I want to get all the risk out of the system. Good luck. The risk that you got out of the system, lots of risks that was great, but there's lots of risks that you didn't even know existed, that you couldn't have had a hope of getting out of the system anyhow. So it's really about managing the risk that you can identify. And I think that's what experience gives you. When I work with people now, it is evident to me on the regular that I know the answers to questions the other person didn't know to ask.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the value of not only success, but of failure.
Yeah.
And so when I look at like these seminars and workshops that are coming up against this year, number one, I'm super jazzed. because it's been a long time since I've run a big seminar and workshop and stood on a stage in front of people, right? COVID messed all that stuff up. But I've had 50 people in a room and had a note card to work off of because the speaker didn't show. To me, it's like, all right, that's not a big deal. Like months to prepare. Of course we can do this. And my mind glosses over some of the details, but what I feel like is a bit like a spider in that all of these details are all interconnected out there. And I'm feeling to know when there's a bug on the web. And a lot of it is by feel. I'll feel it and look for certain signs. Experience tells me that we want pull through, not push through.
Mm-hmm.
Are people accepting and wanting the offer? People that we don't know, people who don't love us, who aren't glad handing us because they don't know how to tell us that we suck. Right? And we all know those people who are like, yeah, that's nice that you told me I did a great job, but we both know I didn't.
Yeah.
We need those people to make it through life, but we need to sometimes reduce that and increase the input from the people who don't love us yet. Are they wanting and pulling through for the offer? All right. So if we get an offer that's half baked and say, hey, this is the offer we've got. If people want that offer, then bake it more. And if they want that offer, then you got something.
Yeah.
At least enough from a risk management standpoint, you have enough to go off and test it because there's no 100% guarantee until you do it. That's just what it is. You have to, at some point in time, do it. So you begin to develop a sense, a feeling for that's wind blowing on my web, or that's a bug blowing on my web.
Yeah.
It's a different feeling, but you wouldn't know until you went rushing out. And you're like, oh no.
Unless you've already gone chasing after the wind. Yeah.
Exactly. And also you would sometimes you go chasing after the bug and you get the bug and you're like, oh no, that bug is here to kill me.
Yeah.
I need to cut it out of the web and drop it.
Yeah.
You wouldn't know that until you went rushing out. There's no amount for some of us. Maybe it's for all of us. I don't know. But nothing beats experiencing these situations ourselves. And then you take those situations in and like we talked about before, these seminars, I don't want to do them on my own. It wouldn't be great. It might not even be average. I want to do it with somebody else. And I have a particular set of skills that can amplify and create an experience that is above average. I know that. I've done it. And a lot of it is feeling. And all of those skills were developed because I had simply an interest in a lot of these things. And I followed my interests for the past 40 something years.
Yes.
That's what it was. Not all of it was profitable in the moment, but it was enjoyable. It was interesting. And sometimes I made some really terrible mistakes. And I'm like, what? You did what? Okay, great. Now I have a much better feeling for what's on the web. Chase after it. Don't chase after it. Cut it out.
Yeah.
Right? There's a much better feeling for it. And that is the risk management component. Everything we do is going to be risk. But it was risky to wake up. It was risky to get up today, if you think about it, but it didn't stop us. We got up and we did something. And we trust that we can get up and not fall on the floor, not burn our mouths on coffee or whatever, because we've done it so many times.
Yeah.
And that's no different than for the work we do in business. Once we do it just so many times, we know the risk. It's a calculated risk for us to just do something. It's a calculated risk to go to a sales call.
Yep.
It's a calculated risk when you're like, I'm not going to do business with this person. There's also the stories of where a person received 1,000 rejections and then they got their one thing and that became the epic, amazing movie or whatever it was.
Oh, yeah.
So do we have to take the one does that cause you to go, I shouldn't reject anybody because we never know if somebody's going to make it big? No, that's ridiculous. You do what you can in the moment. And sometimes your rejection helps that person make their product, service, or message better. And sometimes it's just not for you.
Somewhere in the annals of history is the scout from Decca Records who rejected the Beatles before Capitol Records picked them up.
Yeah.
What a mistake that was. No, it wasn't a mistake. He was doing the best he could with the information he had. Did he kick himself? Maybe a few times. You know? But you can't let that things like that stop you. You have to learn from them. And it's the learning from them, as you said, that makes someone a seasoned and experienced businessman, and a seasoned and experienced entrepreneur, business owner can handle greater degrees of responsibility. Going back to the words of Jesus there, right? It's not just, will you be faithful with small things? It's also, can you handle big things? And the greatest evidence that you can is that you're faithful with the small things.
Yeah.
And by being faithful with the small things, it's not just being like you said, passing the test or not having any blemishes or anything like that. No, quite the opposite. Question, I think when he's talking about being faithful with small things there, he's talking about fully embracing them, taking full ownership of them, including the parts that you've messed up, done incorrectly, didn't know what to do, and made a mess of things. But if you own that and you've learned from it and you've moved on from it and you say, I know this time not to do that, you're climbing the ladder and you're getting to the point where you can be trusted with something much more substantial.
Yes. So let's wrap this up. Christmas time. So let's wrap this up with a bow. We've talked about a lot of different things here. We've talked about trusting the process, which is one of the underlying points of today. And then there's what process? What process is at work? And the answer is there's lots of processes at work. The overarching process I want to point out is that we are becoming something and someone.
Mm-hmm.
And all of these individual things, whether I'm not stepping into reaching out to a friend who needs me, or whether I learned from that and then always step out to be in the awkward, embrace the awkward, or whether we are holding ourselves back from creating content on the regular because for whatever reason, some sort of block in our mind, what are people going to think of me? It's going to be awkward. Right. Or whether we step into it, trust the process, do the work, or whether like you and I are planning for a big 2024 with workshops and seminars around the country, producing those, mitigating the risk or managing the risk, and going all in. If you expect to get anything out, you got to go all in. All of those things are just as they should be. The success, the failure is just what it should be. If you want it to be different now, then do something different now.
Yeah. Reminds me of in The Matrix, where Morpheus says, know what happened exactly as it should have and could not have happened any other way. And they say, how do you know that? And he says, we are still alive.
Yeah. Yeah. There is that comfort, which does not mean that we do not have responsibility to make things different or better now. Right.
Yeah.
But everything did bring us to this point. So don't look at it in its face and despise it. I think back to a conversation we had before, probably was around Thanksgiving. Be thankful for where we're at. Be thankful for where you're at today. And that thankfulness will unlock all of the better qualities that we do want to become. And those qualities are not developed through riches. In fact, I think as Jim Carrey, I just read a quote from him the other day, last night, in fact, he said this. He said, I think everybody should become famous and should become rich and have all the things they desire, to find out that is not what you desire.
Yeah.
And I think there's so much meat in that, which we don't have time to unpack today, but there's so much meat in that little quote there from a guy who has lived a very exposed life, an overnight success, continued on that path and got everything that he wanted, to find out that he was not who he wanted to be.
Yeah.
And now he's retired. And he looked an interviewer in the face and he said, you know what, this is something you probably never heard from anybody, any celebrity. I have enough. I am enough.
People don't know what to do with that when you tell them that. They're like, does not compute.
Yeah. But on the eternal timeline, it's the perspective is different. Yeah. We're going to produce these seminars and workshops, dude. We're going to go all in and we're going to do it one step at a time. We're going to generate content about it. We're going to talk about it. We're going to get ourselves out there so that people know, because I think that we do have a lot of value to add. We've seen that value in micro ways, one-on-one conversations, which are all of one individual's world. And sometimes, and then we know that. And so it's like micro doesn't mean insignificant, but on a macro level, delivering the messages to 100 people in the room in that intensive workshop spreads that value even faster. And if we're not taking all of your experience and all of my experience to the moment, then we might be wasting it a little bit. And what's the sense in that?
No point in having it if you can't share it.
Yeah, that's my opinion. It's the Tuesday workshop in the Thinker community, where we help founders create products, services, and messages they think are going to change the world. Hopefully, this conversation has changed a little part of the world. I know that I've got some meat out of this today, and I get to ruminate on these things. And that's what I'm thankful for it. I'm thankful for our weekly meetings to discuss these topics that matter, because it takes effort takes regular sharpening.
Yeah.
Even the best of knives need regular sharpening.
Give me 6 hours to cut down a tree and I'll spend the first 4 sharpening the axe.
There you go.